Welcome to the debate. Today, I want to start by inducing a very specific and I think very common form of panic. You're sitting on your couch, you're comfortable, maybe you're surrounded by a few days' worth of mail, some laundry that hasn't quite made it upstairs, and, the remnants of a project you started last weekend. And then, the doorbell rings. And it's not the delivery driver. It's a guest, a real, live person who wants to come inside.
Oh, that is the stuff of nightmares for so many people. It's that immediate dash and stash. You're kicking magazines under the sofa, you're throwing the pile of mail into the oven, which, I will admit, I have actually done, and you're just breathless by the time you open the door.
It's a completely universal struggle. We are tackling the battle against stuff. And if you look at the research, it seems like we're losing that battle. 40% of American families explicitly state they find it difficult to keep their homes neat and organized. That is nearly half the population living with this low-grade background hum of anxiety.
And that anxiety is so corrosive, isn't it? It affects how we interact with our families, how we relax, even how we see ourselves. But the core disagreement we have today isn't about whether clutter is bad. We both know it is. It's about how to fix it.
Exactly. And that brings us to our central question. Is the path to an organized home primarily a mechanical discipline? A set of learned skills, rigid systems, and just pure execution? Or is it, as you often argue, a psychological journey that requires some deep self-analysis?
I would argue that you absolutely cannot fix the room until you fix what's in your head. The clutter is just a symptom. The piles on the floor are manifestations of personality traits, of hidden fears. If you just clean the room without addressing the clutter personality, the mess will be back in 3 days, guaranteed.
I see why you'd think that, but let me offer a different perspective. I believe organization is a skill set. It's like Home Ec 101 for the real world. Success comes from applying precise methods, using timers, and adhering to spatial rules regardless of how you feel about it. You don't need a therapist, you need a system.
A system implies that people are rational actors. And when it comes to their stuff, they usually aren't.
But what if they just never learn the basics? The material uses this really compelling analogy that I think supports my position perfectly. It says innate organizational ability is kind of like musical pitch. Some people have perfect pitch. They're just naturally organized. They walk in the door, they hang up their keys, they file the mail without a second thought. But the rest of us, we aren't hopeless. We just need to learn the scales.
That's a fair analogy. But practicing scales requires the will to actually sit down at the piano. I'm talking about the barrier to practicing.
But the solution to chaos is action, not introspection. The research clearly outlines that clutter is the result of deferred decision-making. That pile on the counter isn't emotional weight. It's just a stack of decisions you haven't made yet. Do I pay this bill? Do I keep this flyer? The way out isn't to sit on a couch and analyze your childhood. It is to force rapid decisions through a structured process.
Forced rapid decisions usually lead to regret or just moving the pile from one room to another room.
Not if you use the STOP method. This is the primary engine of success in the mechanical view. It stands for sort, toss, organize, and put away. It just cuts through all the noise. You don't wander around aimlessly. You get the tools of the trade, a kitchen timer, 3 specific boxes labeled put away, storage, and sell donate. And this is the most critical tool, an opaque garbage bag.
Why is the opacity so important to you?
Because if you can see it, you will rescue it. The opaque bag prevents second guessing. You set the timer, you make the decision, you drop it in that black bag, and it's gone. It is a mechanical process designed to thaw those frozen decisions.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that it's that simple. One-size-fits-all systems, like your STOP method, they so often fail because they ignore the human element. You're treating the house like a factory floor. If you don't understand the clutter personality that's governing the behavior, the mess is just inevitable.
You think personality dictates destiny?
I think it dictates strategy. The text identifies these specific archetypes that defy simple systems. Take the rebel, for instance. This is someone who sees cleaning as submission to authority. Maybe they had a really strict parent who demanded a military-style room, so now, as an adult, they refuse to pick up as an act of subconscious defiance. A timer doesn't help them. It just feels like another rule to break.
That seems like a very elaborate excuse for laziness. I'm not messy, I'm a rebel.
It's not laziness, it's about identity. Or look at the perfectionist. They are the polar opposite of the rebel, but they end up with the exact same mess. They won't organize a junk drawer unless they have the perfect shelf paper and the color-coded bins and a label maker with the right font. They suffer from this all-or-nothing paralysis. They look at the drawer, realize they can't do it perfectly right now, and so they do nothing. They don't need a timer, they need permission to do a B- job. You cannot timer your way out of an identity crisis.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. I believe the system actually cures the paralysis. Let's look at the mechanics of removal versus the emotional weight of objects. You mentioned the opaque garbage bag earlier as just a tool, but I'd argue it's a psychological weapon in a good way.
A weapon against what?
Against hesitation. The garbage bag strategy is specific. You use that black bag, so family members and even the cleaner themselves cannot see what is being tossed and rescue it. We all do this, right? You see a frayed wire or a broken toy in the trash can and you think, wait, I could fix that. If it's in a black bag, out of sight, out of mind becomes a functional reality.
Okay, that's a compelling argument for trash, for actual garbage. But have you considered the sentimentalist or the hoarder? For those personalities, the black bag approach is genuinely traumatic.
We're not talking about tossing heirlooms in the trash. We are talking about clearing the debris of daily life.
But the problem is that for the hoarder, debris is potential. The source material gives this vivid, almost heartbreaking example of a hoarder who kept stacks and stacks of newspapers. To you and me, that's a fire hazard and recycling. To her, she was keeping them to make papier-mâché angels.
And did she ever make the angels?
No, she never made a single one. But the issue wasn't that she didn't know how to use a garbage bag. It was a belief in potential and creativity run amok. She didn't see trash. She saw angels. If you force that into a black bag, you aren't cleaning her house. You are destroying her dreams.
But that dream is a nightmare for the people living with her. And that is why I advocate for the one-in, one-out promise and the no-buy-it diet. These are mechanical valves to control volume. You want a new magazine? The old one goes. You want a drill? You rent it. It completely bypasses the emotional debate about potential by setting a hard numerical limit.
Limits are good, but let's go back to the sentimentalist who is drowning in mementos. Your toss-it approach causes real pain. The text offers a much more nuanced psychological solution. Photograph the object.
So digital clutter instead of physical clutter?
It's about preservation without possession. If you have a child's drawings, hundreds of them, you don't keep the whole pile. You keep one representative item per month, or you take a picture of the rest. This addresses something called identity clutter.
Define that for us.
Identity clutter is keeping things that anchor us to a past self. The college beer keg you haven't used in 20 years. The macrame wall hanging from a phase you moved past. We aren't using them. We're just afraid that if we throw them out, we lose the memory of who we were. The solution isn't a garbage bag. It's journaling about the memory or framing a photo of the era and then releasing the object. It requires psychological closure, not just a trash run.
I can accept that for the purely sentimental items. That's a fair compromise. But let's be honest. The majority of that 40% of families who are struggling, they are tripping over macrame, they are tripping over shoes, backpacks, and mail. And this brings us to spatial strategy. I argue that the anxiety people feel is because they lack a front door forward strategy.
Explain how that works mechanically.
You start at the entrance and you move right. You methodically clear public areas first. This immediately reduces social anxiety, that panic when the doorbell rings. It's logical. And within those rooms, you need centers. The text explicitly references the preschool or kindergarten model.
Which implies we should treat adults like children?
It implies that preschools are efficiency machines. I mean, think about it. A kindergarten classroom has 25 chaotic kids, yet it is organized. Why? Because they have specific zones for activities. A reading center, a wrap-a-mail center, a grooming center. Everything needed for that activity is right there. You don't wander around looking for scissors. They're in the wrap center.
So you want a grooming center in the living room.
It's the principle. And crucially, these centers rely on hot, warm, and cold zones.
I did find the zoning concept interesting, I have to say, strictly from a utility standpoint.
It's essential physics. The hot zone is eye level, or the front of a drawer. That's for your daily tools. The warm zone is high shelves for weekly items. And cold, or what the author calls outer Siberia, is for annual items. If you put a daily item in a cold zone, you create a mess, because you won't put it back. You'll just leave it on the counter, because the storage spot is too hard to reach. That's mechanics, pure and simple.
I don't disagree with the logic, but I do challenge the rigidity. Rigid zoning fails if it contradicts natural habits or personality needs.
How so? If I create a perfect system, you just have to follow it.
Well, the source material shares a perfect example regarding a husband's poker library. The advocate, or, the tidy spouse, would look at books and papers piled on the breakfast table and call it a disaster. They'd want to file it away in a cold zone or a study.
Well, if it's on the breakfast table, it is a mess. People need to eat there.
But for the husband, it was an indispensable resource. He needed it visible to work on his hobby. The solution wasn't putting it away in outer Siberia. It was creating a specific shelf near his usage area, the breakfast table. The system had to bend to his habit.
That sounds like enabling clutter.
No, it's enabling function. And this connects to the concept of clutter preserves. You have to designate wild areas, a specific chair, a junk drawer, a magazine bucket, where chaos is allowed.
Allowed chaos?
Controlled chaos. This manages the rebel's need for freedom. If you demand a clean desk from a visual organizer who needs to see their tools to think, you stifle them. A clutter preserve contains the mess without crushing the spirit.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it sounds like surrender. Clutter preserves just sounds like giving up. The goal is maintenance, and you maintain order through momentum, not by fencing off chaos.
Momentum is hard to sustain when you're just tired.
That is why you use the penicillin method.
The antibiotic?
It's a metaphor. You clean one small spot, maybe just the sink. That clean culture spreads. You see the clean sink, so you wipe the counter. You start with one drawer. The text calls it the drawer-a-day method, and you use the timer 15 minutes max to prevent burnout. The key to maintenance isn't personality. It's the evening sweep.
Which is what?
A nightly patrol to return items to their homes. If everything has a home based on those hot and warm zones, it takes 5 minutes. If you do the sweep, the clutter never gets a chance to settle.
I agree that maintenance is vital, but I would frame it as conquering scarcity thinking. The reason people fail at maintenance isn't because they forget the evening sweep. It's because they pick up a yogurt container and think, I might need this someday.
That is irrational.
It is fear. It's the fear that they won't have what they need in the future. That is the deferrer personality. They say, I'll decide tomorrow. The deferrer doesn't need a schedule. They need a cutoff date.
A deadline?
Exactly. If the cross-stitch project isn't done by November 1st, it goes. You force the issue. But more importantly, the psychological burden is too heavy to carry alone. The text emphasizes finding fellow travelers or clutterers buddies, groups like Clutterers Anonymous. You need social support to break that emotional bond with stuff. A timer is a lonely tool. A friend is a support system.
I see the value in support, but ultimately, someone has to do the work. The emotions are real, I grant you that, but they are often just excuses for inaction. You can analyze your scarcity mindset for 10 years and still be unable to walk through your hallway.
That's true. But you can also set a timer every single day and just shuffle the same piles around because you can't let go of the papier-mâché angels.
Touché. But to summarize my position, organization is a process, not a product. You cannot buy a solution at a container store. The text says, start where you are, take a single step. The act of setting the timer and sorting is the cure for the anxiety. You don't think your way into right acting, you act your way into right thinking.
And I would summarize by saying that a perfect home is a trap set by the perfectionist mind. We have to distinguish between true heirlooms, like the great-grandmother's quilt mentioned in the text, and heirloom clutter, like that ugly sofa we keep out of guilt. Acknowledging this difference is an act of self-knowledge, not just housekeeping. The goal is clean enough based on your lifestyle, not a magazine spread.
It seems we do agree on one thing. Whether you use a timer or a journal, the ultimate goal is a home that functions for the life lived inside it.
Indeed, it is about making space for living, rather than making space for storage.
So, to our listeners, we invite you to pick up a timer.
Or look in the mirror.
Or begin. That's it for the debate. Join us next time.